If you want to hook up a Victron 250-100 or one of the other Victron smart charge controllers, you're in the right place. I'll walk you through all the different connections I did, why I used the fuses and breakers that I used, why I used the shutoffs that I used, and hopefully that'll help you accelerate your build. All right, here we are at the solar shed. We've got a couple of things taken care of. We've got the Victron 250-100 TR mounted. We put it up on this nice board, showed you painting it. I mounted a couple of bus bars, so I'm thinking that we are going to drop the bus bars, drop the wires for the batteries down to the shelves down here. And so that means that the bus bars will connect here. So this video is specifically about hooking up the smart charge controller, the Victron 250-100. We are going to take these cables that we've got here that came in. These are marine grade 1/0, or not 1/0, 1 AUG cables that I got for the charge controller. So here's the lugs we're going to be using, and we're going to put one lug on each of the ends here, and then the other end we will run down and connect and cut off right at the charge controller on this end. So this end will be the bus bar, this end will be the charge controller, and we will just trim these to exactly the right size, put them in the ideal place, we'll shrink wrap them and make them look really nice. So we are going to need a heat gun to do the shrink wrapping when we get there, and we are going to use my trusty toolkit. I will include links to the toolkit, the hydraulic crimping tool, and the heat gun, and the lugs, and the cable on Amazon so that you guys can see what I used here. But the idea here is to build good, strong, safe cables for what we're doing. And the first thing we want to do is, I'm going to move some of this out of the way, and the first thing we want to do is we are going to trim off the amount of wire that we need trimmed back here. So you can see here, this needs to be trimmed back about to here in order for it to go all the way in that lug. And you want to be careful when you're doing this not to cut so deep that you cut the strands of wire now. And it takes a little bit sometimes just to work these with being very careful and cautious not to cut the copper strands below. So you want to just kind of carefully trim this out now and cleanly get that off without hurting any of the copper wire underneath it. So that was perfect. And you can see that is very stranded into 2, 4, 6, 7 larger strands in there, and then this will fit directly into this lug. You want to be careful to get all of the wires in there. That is like a perfect fit. All right, then for the crimper, what we want to do is we want to get the right crimping size here. You basically put these in here like this, and then we basically are going to just take this. I always try to line up this lug this way so that it crimps from top to bottom. I really don't know that there's any benefit of other than just me being anal. I always put this kind of upside down where I'm pushing down on the floor because it does take some pressure to crimp these closed. And then once I start getting close to the end here, just make sure that it's all pushed in good and tight. And then these last few here, push so it does bond the wire and the lug together there. As you can see, that is really good. It's a nice crimp. I can loosen this. It's flared out a little on the sides, which is okay. Good and tight. Then you just take the, I'm going to reach behind the camera here and plug in the heat shrink gun. Hopefully I won't bump the camera. And then we just want to heat shrink this down. Just want to look at that crimp one more time, make sure it's good. It's nice and tight up against the insulation here. It's good there. It's good and tight. It's nice and flat. I want to keep this insulation back far enough to where I can make sure the screw gets flat and doesn't get any insulation under it. Make sure it doesn't interfere with the flatness on this side also. Then I'm going to heat shrink this on to give it that nice finished look and to protect it against touching, crimping, other things touching it, make it look really nice. As you can see, that shrinks down around that really, really well. And you can see that glue start to ooze out a little bit around the edges there. That tells me that it is completely sealed now, with water sealed. I can shut that off. And you can see the glue here is sealed out, so that's sealed to that insulation on that side and around the copper connector on this side. It is a little bit warm. That will allow it to lay perfectly flat. The full surface area is still exposed on this side. That's a really good crimping job. All right, so another aspect of putting the Victron charge controller in is a PV shutoff. So what I want to do is I want to run from the charge controller straight down into the PV shutoff from here. So I want to run 2 wires down. Now I had this one already built up and sitting in the shed. So I'm just got another connector, and I'm going to build the connector for the negative side here. So basically these leads don't need to be very long. So I'm just going to cut off this extra cable here. And then we're going to basically put this connector on here, and I'm going to walk you through how you do that. You need the cable ends here, and you need, these are the tips that go on into the cable, and then they slide into this. And I'm going to walk you through how to do that. This comes apart, but it's really not necessary that you take it apart. There is a rubber garment in here that when this gets tightened down, it squeezes around the wire and causes a watertight connection. It is important that you buy the right one of these to match the cable. This is 10 AUG wire, and these are made for 10 and 12 AUG cables. So the part that is counterintuitive here is there are 2 types of little metal connectors that you connect to these. There's a big one, and then there's the small one that fits in it. You would think that it would go, so when these slide together, they like pitch together like this, and that's what makes the connection. The big one goes in the little one, and the little one goes in the big one, and then it fits inside there. So always catches me off guard, and I always end up getting something wrong there. So I'm just going to trim the end of this wire off to make that a nice clean end. And then I want to strip off enough to where I can wrap it completely around this clamp here, and then it sticks out this end, but it doesn't go too far up in that line because I don't want to interfere when this slides in there. I don't want to interfere with it. So I could actually go way up in there like that. I'm not going to. I'm just going to go about this far. So it's almost a 1/2 inch, I would say, maybe 3/8 of an inch. And then you want to pick the right stripping here because, again, you don't want to cut off the strands of wire. You just want to get a nice clean stripping of the wire without taking the strands off with it. As you can see, that one worked really well. The one thing that I've noticed about these strippers, if you pinch one time, you don't twist. When you twist, it does cut them off. You pinch one time, and then you just give it a good pull, and they come off nice and clean. So we're going to use the large end as opposed to the small end. The small end goes in this connector on this side, but we need to connect over here for the negative. So with that connection going there, we are going to need the large end. So the first thing we have to do is place it in that little chamber there. Now usually what I like to do is just pinch those together a little bit so that they fit in the tool a little easier. And once they're pinched together, then you have a clamp here. This tool will basically take those 2 wings and fold them up into the wire and clamp them down good and tight. So I slide it all the way in, and then you put it in the clamping tool and you basically make sure that you have it centered, those two wings, right in the middle of the clamping tool. And then when you pinch it, this will latch it down and not let you stop until you've pinched it all the way. So then you want to pinch it all the way and it should come off. And as you can see, those wings are nicely tucked in and folded in top of there, and that wire is good and held. Now, the rest of this is pretty simple, because now all you have to do is, as long as this is still loose, don't tighten it yet, as long as this is still loose, you just slide it in until it clicks. You hear that click right there? And then you just tighten this down, and that causes that watertight seal. Now you can use the tools if your hands aren't tight enough to crimp down on this and tighten it up. But you want that reasonably tight so that that rubber seal, that rubber garment on the inside seals this up. Now I have one for the negative and I have one for the positive, and I can run those up to the charge controller, and then we can run that off to the PV panels where it picks up the PV. Will come in through here. We can turn it on and off from here, and then that will run the charge controller. And we're going to hook up the cables that you saw us build. And I'm trying to make this very universal for all battery sizes, from the 12-volt system that's currently here to the 48-volt system that is soon to come in Shoulder Shed. So we want to be very accommodating to all different variations. So let's start on the PV side. We need to make sure that the PV connections come out of here and connect into the PV shutoff. And so we're going to come off of this, but I think what we should do first is we should mount this. That way we can trim these wires to fit exactly into these connectors, and then we don't have to worry about things moving on us and switching around. So let's start by doing that. I'm thinking that if we put it down here, that the wires, PV, can come out of the bottom and over to the PV box and connect there. And they can go up and connect here, keep these wires as short as possible with as little loss as possible. So let's do that. Let's mount the PV box. Just got a couple of little flared screws here. Let's just put this in right here. And then on the bottom, so today we are doing this with no power in this system completely. Everything is turned off and we do not have any electricity flowing whatsoever. So you can see here, what I'm going to do is make these cables extremely fit, just to match exactly the size system that we have here. So I think what I'm going to do is plug it in first, and then I'm going to bend it into shape and snip off some of it. We'll cut it about here, and we'll see if that's pretty good. It looks pretty good. So then we're going to strip this end here to go up in there so we can clamp down on it. So I'm just going to strip off a good 1/2 inch. Careful not to pull any strands off of the wire. And then I also want to make sure that I use a ferrule on any of these connectors that I put into here. Now, it's not absolutely necessary to clamp these down on the ferrules, but these smaller sizes do work really good when they're clamped down. So I'm going to go ahead and put a clamp on that one. And I'm going to put this back here, and then I'm going to run it back up into here like that. And then we can tighten that down. There we go. All right, now for the negative side, we do exactly the same thing. We're going to cut this one off, give it a little extra room so if we need it. And I'm going to go straight to stripping this one. Ferrule on it. This is a very tight fit, which is exactly what I wanted. And as you can see, that is a really good fit too. And I'm going to tighten this one down. And there we go. All right. Negative and positive to the PV shutoff is here, and it's complete. Now, that's very easy with the PV wires that we made to basically run these from the PV side here. There we go. Down to the PV combiner box, which is right here, and connect them to the incoming PV wires. We can handle that later. But I wanted to show you it in its finished state. All right, here's what I decided to do. I took the A&L fuse completely out. I had this Daihool breaker. This is a DC rated 100 amp hour breaker. I put it in instead. I've got these for the batteries, which will give me 100 amps on each battery, or 125 amps protection on each battery. But I needed something that could shut the system off, yet still give me the protection. Now, 100 amps isn't going to be enough to run this at full capacity, but it should be more than enough to run the 48 volt system. So I still have to be but I won't really need this for anything other than testing single 12 volt batteries, which if I'm going to be going over 100 amps, then I'll figure out what I'm going to do here with this when I do that. So what I did is I built a couple of cables here. And so here's what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to take these cables and basically loop in, as you see down at the bottom there, I looped in the bottom of the breaker, and I put it where it is because first of all, it works really well, but it lines up with this DC shutoff and this DC shutoff being in the same place, easy access. They work great there. All right, let's take this. And what I want to do is I want to place this. I placed it here because it's got easy access, but it was also one of the best ways I could do this without taking up too much space. I wanted to keep all the battery connections in this area down here, and I didn't want to use too much space up there by running it up there and then have to run cables all the way up there and everything. So the best thing was to just create a loop here. Just a nice little loop of some good quality wire with some good quality lugs like this. Maybe even put that out a little bit so that that's not stressed very much. That ought to give us easy access to, actually that's really kind of good right there. I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. And as you can see, I didn't plan this system out. I'm kind of ad-libbing it to what I want to see and what I want out of it as we go. The one thing I've learned, and it's probably a good idea to actually take more time and plan it, especially if you know exactly what you're trying to achieve. For me, this one is really about testing and making it easy going forward. I know I want 48 volt, I know I want 24 volt. The 12 volt I'm testing differently. That is the food trailer, but I wanted equipment that other than the inverter pieces of it, really was interchangeable. And that's what led me to the smart solar charge controller from Victron. The 12 volt, I really going to need a lot more. I needed a lot more amperage, so the 100 amp will help there. It's still only 1200 watts, but that is better than any other 12 volt we had. This will allow me to charge 12 volt batteries at really close to their maximum capacity if I wanted to push it that far, or charge a couple in parallel or whatever I wanted to do. So this kind of gives me the ability now to shut this off, to isolate those batteries. These will keep the batteries safe with fuses there. I had this sitting in the drawer in the house and then saw a video from Will that talked about these and how much safer they were. So so I went ahead and added that directly here. It made me realize, hey, you know, I've got one of those switches. Why don't I just use that? The only thing that I don't have, didn't like about it is that unlike the A&L fuse, that was 250 amps and could handle the capacity of this 3000 watt inverter, or at least most of it, it limits it to 100 amps. To be honest with you, I'm okay with that. I don't think I like any of my systems running over 100 amps anyway. And if they do run over 100 amps, I want to make sure that they're not temporary setups like this, that they're much bigger cables when we get into some 4-aught and things like that. So I'm more interested in a good, safe testing place where I could show you 12-volt batteries and go through explicitly what is the process that I use to test batteries. I don't use the teardown method that you see on some of the other channels and things like that. So I needed to have a good system to do that. This gives me that system, but it gives me a way to play with the 48-volt stuff at the same time. Okay, enough said about that. So now we have the that design there. I went ahead and cut that off of this one. What I'm thinking here is that we basically do something along this line right here to handle the charge controller. And we just basically put it in a second slot here, like that. That's nice and clean looking. It goes straight across. The only thing that it does that I really don't like is it runs across these, although it doesn't interfere with any of them. So maybe that's not a bad thing. And I could zip tie here, and then that could twist and go straight up in there easily. Let's see if we button those down, how that comes out looking. Let's do one over here. We do that, pull that tight. There we go. So snip this off, make that look better. Snip this off, make that look better. Then this can go and do basically the same thing. Okay, now we just need to get these two wires trimmed to the right size. I had to square it up a little bit. My tool won't fit anything that big. So I just took the pliers and kind of bent it. Now, when I clamp this down, when I tighten this down, it will crush that ferrule around there. But the important part is that it's holding the wires together in there. And there's no way that's coming out or that it isn't making a good connection anymore. And that is really the goal here. And we're going to do the same on this one as we did on the other one. Just going to give it a little bit of a crimp this way and a little bit of a crimp this way to make it square, because this is right at the size of the charge controller's limit. So it has to be shaped just right to go in there. Then we're going to make sure we loosen this all the way. And we're going to insert the black just like that. Then we're going to hold it in place while we tighten it down with that ferrule on there. It'll hold all those wires together nice and tight underneath the clamp. This has a clamp that goes like this on the wire, and it won't allow it to bulge out. It won't allow any of those strands to come loose. and it'll force it to act as one big conductor, just as we want. There we go. Check that out. That's really nice. All right, here we are. I'm going to wrap this version up, and then I'll come back in and tell you the remainder of the story. Right now, I went ahead and hooked it up because I'm running a test on a battery, and this battery review will come out later. But I did want to kind of go over the end result here. This is an operating system now. It is running. I've got the battery cables coming in, just one battery coming in. This is exactly the intended purpose of this, is to actually have a battery testing unit. So the solar is turned on. The power is coming in through the battery bank here, which is where this feeds. I did hook up the shunt wires to one on the bottom and one on the top, and then that gives me the variance that I can see between the two, which is kind of cool. The breaker shuts the power off, which runs over to this bus bar, which controls where the charge controller is feeding in over here. And of course, the PV is running down here and feeding in those lines I had coming from the original version 2 solar shed. So then we have the inverter, the same inverter. Right now it is running a 24 amps charge on the battery, and I had just ran it down previously. So it is charging up the battery. On the negative side, we have the negative wire that runs over to the charge controller up there, which we saw earlier. And then we have this is just a clamp for a USB port, which runs my Raspberry Pi 4, which is running the Venus system. I just kind of clipped everything on those, and the shunt is connected here. And then, of course, the two connectors, this connector and this connector running. Of course, these two connectors running over to the inverter, and positive and negative. So as you can see, the system looks pretty good. Charge controller, DC shutoffs, all the positive bus bars and connections and shut off over here. All the negative is down in this area down here. I am just using the plugs directly on the bottom of the inverter. I do not have any other power connected to it because this inverter had the plugs, and since it's only 3,000 watts and I can only run it at 100 amps anyway because of this breaker, that should be more than enough to perform the test I want, especially considering most of the tests are going to be run on batteries like this one here, where it's just a 100 amp hour battery, and that means 100 amps is the max that I need to be pulling anyhow. So it shouldn't be a problem. And then that's it. So I'll run some tests on this, and then we will hook up the rest of the PV and stuff for the rest of the battery bank, and hopefully look at doing something over there next. Or maybe not next. We'll see. I'm going to wrap this video up, but I wanted to say this is going to be a hell of a ride. Solar Shed's got its upgrades. This is just the first, so we can perform some testing on some new batteries coming in. But the batteries are getting bigger, and the Solar Shed upgrades won't stop. So if you like this kind of content, I encourage you, like and subscribe. We're going to continue making this kind of content. And as you can see from this picture right here, there's some 48 volt stuff in the progress. We're going to make sure that this system can support both. And that way you understand it's a dual purpose project. One, let me have a good test station. Two, let's upgrade the solar shed to 48 volt. 48 volt is where the real power is, and where I can feed the RV and make sure that I collect all the power that I want and that I need. At the same time, if you haven't seen the 24 volt power pack that I'm building, that's going to be a cool video also. I took all the old equipment from in here and I put it into a portable 24 volt power pack. It's pretty cool. So anyway, I will include a quick picture of it right here. And I will see you on the next video. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. And I appreciate all of you. Thanks to the subscribers. Thanks to all the members. And thanks to everyone who views. Y'all have a great day.